guys, BioPhoenix here, and after the month of October, I'm taking a look at an adventure game that could very well be a survival horror, but without the horror theme to it, and it ever so happens to be on the system that had a lot of these, being the PS1, and that happens to be Enigma. Now, remember when I reviewed the game Nanatsu no Haiken, I was really shocked to know that the company Koei made a horror game, or like an adventure-style game. Well, to blow your minds even further, they actually did another one before that, being this one. And just like Nanatsu no Haiken, it was only released in Japan in 1998. But the developer, instead of being Koei themselves, it's actually Omega Force, which is basically their small division team within Koei that is most well known for doing the Dynasty Warrior games. In fact, this was actually their second game after doing the first Dynasty Warrior game, you know, the one that was like a fighting game. And as I said, the setting in this one is not a horror setting. Instead, it's kind of like a classic adventure movie kind of setting. So basically, it's kind of like Indiana Jones, where you discover ruins of foreign countries. So yeah, I just had to play this one. Even though this game has yet to see a fan translation, thankfully I did find a walkthrough of this game, which was very helpful. So yeah, this game was definitely playable for me. So now, let's talk about the very little story that I know. So the game takes place in the 1920s, and there are three main characters, and they happen to be Akira Yamagata, Thomas Lindo, and Catherine Edwards. So Akira's father happened to be an archaeologist who was trying to examine something that was in Antarctica, and supposedly this thing that he was examining happened to be something that can take you to the Holy Land. Well, apparently things got fucked up and he ended up disappearing, and now our main character, Akira, is just trying to look for him and also just trying to look for other things that lead up to it. For that, he discovers a book that was from his father before he disappeared. And the two other characters end up having their own motivations, but end up meeting Akira along the way and end up getting tangled in each other's messes. So that's my understanding of the basics of it, and well, yeah, it seems like your typical tribute to adventure films, and that's all well and good for me, because I do enjoy that kind of shit. Now, something that is worth pointing out is that because there are three playable characters in the game, the stories with three of the characters are slightly different from one another, but the weird thing is that all the stages are almost exactly the same, but you do them in different orders. And depending on which character you play as, you will have different enemy placements or different item placements as well. So just as an example, when you go to the India stage as Akira, at the beginning part it'll be Akira and Catherine talking with each other, but if you do it as Catherine's story, it'll be her and some archaeologist guy who just happens to look like old Joseph from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure talking. Son of a bitch! So now, as for the gameplay. So just like most adventure games at the time, it's one that has pre-rendered backgrounds. And you walk around, picking up items, reading notes, doing puzzles, and fighting monsters. So it is exactly what you would expect. And all the different settings that you go to are stage-based. And after you complete a setting, you'll get a percentage. I'm not 100% sure how the percentage works, but from what I know is that the higher it is, sometimes you'll get better items after completing one. But the one big difference with this game compared to other adventure games at the time is the combat. So to get in combat mode, you gotta hold either L1 or L2, and when doing so, you have three different attacks, and they are square, circle, and triangle. So square is for left hand, circle is for right hand, and triangle is for overhead. So Akira uses jujitsu, Catherine uses a fencing sword, and Thomas happens to use knives and guns, although you can actually get a gun with Akira, but his main set is fists. And using these three different attack buttons, you can actually do different combinations and do different combo move sets. It's kinda cool. In fact, it kinda reminds me of the game Hard Edge, which I reviewed earlier this year. And you can use magic, but you can only use it when you get equipped with a secret stone, and you do that by pressing the X button while in combat mode. And you can block with R1 and R2. So the combat in this game is mostly melee focused, and it does feel differently compared to a lot of other adventure games at the time. Like I said, the only one that's similar to this that I've played was Hard Edge. And of course, how can I forget, you also get a map, which is very easy to use in this game. So now, let's get moving on to the game's controls, and I know I've kind of already went through like most of the BUD layout, and it is pretty easy to understand once you know what you're doing, but do they at least feel good? Well, sometimes. So as you might expect, this game does have tank controls, which is very common. And I know I've said this many times in the past, but for these kind of games, I actually don't mind tank controls, and for this game, yeah, I'm okay with them, but I can understand people not liking them though. But when it comes to the combat of the game, while I do appreciate them for trying to do something different, unfortunately, I feel that the combat in this one feels a little bit clunky. And I find that doing some of the combinations of this game have to be very precise, and it can be kind of annoying to do sometimes. And it's not like the button combinations you gotta do are like super ridiculously long, like some type of combo in Tekken or something. But even doing like a short combo of like 3 buttons, it still takes some time to get used to the pattern and how it goes. So because of that, the combat can be a little bit frustrated if you want to actually try and get good at it, but of course you can always just cheese your way out of things by just tapping like 2 buttons over and over again, and you'll do good. Well, that's until you fight the bosses in this game, but I'll get more into that a little later. But yeah, overall, the controls are okay. I mean, they could be a lot worse than this, but at the same time, they could also be much better, because I find that Hard Edge actually did the melee combat a lot better, and that was actually one of my favorite parts about that game. But the gunplay in this game is a lot better than Hard Edge, so I guess it kind of evens itself out, right? So now, as for the game's graphics, now this game for 1998, I think it looks really nice. So probably my favorite part about the graphics is the pre-rendered backgrounds. Not only am I just a huge fan of pre-rendered background games, but also I find that the ones in here, they all look really fucking good. Like there's a lot of like really cool looking set pieces in this game. And I gotta be honest, out of all the games that I played that had pre-rendered backgrounds, this might actually be one of my favorite looking ones. Now when it comes to the character models, yeah, I know they're very old and outdated, and yeah, they are old and outdated. But for the time it came out, I think they look pretty alright. Although I'd say that the monster designs and the boss designs are probably like some of the cooler looking ones. But as for the main characters, yeah, they're alright. Although I gotta say, Akira kinda looks a little bit like a younger version of Guts from Berserk, while Thomas kinda looks like that constipated bastard Nikolai from Shadow Hearts 2. So that did kind of amuse me, and like I already said, we got old Joseph in this game, and yeah, I know his name's not Joseph, but I refuse to call him anything else at this point. So yeah, overall, I do think that the graphics do look pretty good, but it's mostly the pre-rendered backgrounds is really what's the showstopper here, at least for me. So now, as for the game's music, I do think it is a pretty nice OST. A lot of the songs in this game fit the settings perfectly, and also I do find a lot of the songs are pretty relaxing. So I really do like the music here. Unfortunately, the songs aren't like the most catchiest thing ever, but they do work good for what they are. But probably the worst part is that, well, I couldn't find any of the music like anywhere at all, so you're pretty much listening to whatever the hell I'm putting in here. But if you do decide to play this game, well, I can say that the music is actually pretty nice sounding. So now, if you want to go out and buy this game, so if you do have a way to play Japanese PS1 games, and by the way, this game has 2 discs, so if you have that disc swapping technique, well, you gotta do it twice to be able to go through it. And this game is like dirt fucking cheap. Like, I've seen a complete copy going for like $5. But I've also seen other complete copies going for about like $10, $12, but for the most part, they're usually around like $5 to $10. So as of right now, thankfully, this game won't cost you an arm and a leg. And next thing you know, after this video is uploaded, the game prices on this game go up to like $100. Well, probably not, but you guys know I'm just fucking around. So now, as for my overall thoughts on this game, is that Enigma is okay. I don't think it's great, but I also don't think it's a bad game either. But I'd mostly call it average though. So in comparison to the game Nanatsu no Haiken on the Dreamcast, yeah, that game is a lot better. But I do feel that this game could have had potential to be even better than Nanatsu no Haiken, but unfortunately I found that the combat in this game was just not as executed as well as I kinda hoped. But even though the combat wasn't as good as I hoped, I can at least say that it wasn't like completely awful. I mean, it was at least a lot better than like many other games like Vampire Hunter D. Oh god, you know, I seem to talk shit about that game a lot, and it happens to be based after one of my favorite animes. And no, I'm not reviewing it anytime soon. But other than the combat not being as good, one of my other biggest issues with this game are the boss fights. This is probably the worst part of the game in my opinion, because the boss fights in this game are fucking terrible. Which is really disappointing too, because all the boss characters in this game look fucking badass, but then you realize that all the bosses have the exact same pattern, and yet they're such a pain in the ass to fight. So what all the bosses do in this game is that they just circle around your character, and every once in a while they'll like shoot projectiles at you. And trying to run up to them, get into attack mode, and trying to land a hit on them is a pain in the ass, for not only are they just trying to spin around you constantly, but also they teleport like right behind you. It's like, piss the fuck off. So yeah, the bosses in this game are just not fun, and they're just tedious as fuck, and I hate them. And they almost killed the game for me, which is a real shame, because other than that, I actually like the adventuring aspect of it and doing the puzzles. Yeah, I like doing the puzzles better than actually doing the boss fights. But fighting the regular enemies is just fine, I can deal with that okay, but just the boss fights is just...
Stupid fucking cunt, you idiot!
So yeah, because of that, that's why I think this game is just okay. It had potential to be good, but like I said, it's definitely not like the worst of its kind, but it's also not the best either. And because of that, it's a little tough to recommend this game to other people, especially the fact that it's a Japan-only game that doesn't have a fan translation yet. And of course, I wouldn't mind seeing one in the future, but it wouldn't be a game I would replay anytime soon. Mostly because of those damn boss fights. Oh my god, like, that was just awful. Enough of me bitching about that. I do have one little random fact I want to mention, is that the voice actor for Akira in this game happens to be Toshiyuki Morikawa. And for those that don't know, he was very well known for doing voices such as Yoshikage Kira from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, so yeah, that's kinda cool. But anyways, with that being said, that'll take us to the end of this review, so thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day.